Darren Waller activated off the PUP. We hear from Matthew Judon and more here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today on the show, we have an appearance on the practice field in pads for Miami's newest offensive weapon. We have a press conference that got my Mike McDaniel check your pulse vibes going from Miami's newest defensive weapon. And we finally have the thing that I've been asking the football gods for weeks. We got our hands on it overnight, and it's a little bit of everything. Some offense, some defense, some salary cap situation, forecast. So lots to get into here today on the show. Let's start with Darren Waller. Darren Waller was activated off the PUP list in time for today's practice. Mike McDaniel, when asked last week, said he didn't want the first practice back to be a joint practice. Mike McDaniel at the beginning of this week said that this was the week that he kind of had in mind, but he wanted to be non-committal as far as the formal window for activation for Darren Waller. Well, it turns out today is the perfect blend because the Dolphins have joint practice tomorrow with Jacksonville. They had a walkthrough yesterday. Today was the day for a practice, and it's activated within the week that Mike McDaniel had it envisioned. So Darren Waller, by reports today at Dolphins training camp, did not participate in the 11-on-11, but was a part of individual drills, was part of the install, so had some run, but not in the team setting. So incremental progress. And I know there's Dolphins fans that have concerns about Waller and his contributions and how much he's going to contribute to this year's football team. And it brings echoes of Odell Beckham, of a player who came in and was brought in and wasn't ready for the start of the training camp and then spends training camp out of sight, out of mind. We've already made some progress because Darren Waller took his first practice reps like a month before Odell did last year. And this is an important window for Darren Waller to collect these reps with Tua Tagovailoa. That continues to be the biggest concern that I have as far as the outlook for Darren Waller. I think you should set realistic and reasonable expectations for what kind of receiving game profile he's going to have. If you're expecting him to have the Jonnu Smith 110-plus target opportunity, I'd be stunned if that unfolded in that way for Miami. But what I do know is that unless you're just going to run basic sit routes over top of the ball, in which case you could have had anybody who runs those opportunities, you need to have a little bit of chemistry and time on task with the quarterback and the player in question, being Darren Waller, running and working these reps together. So the Dolphins have a few weeks before the start of the season. It may be a secondary receiving role at the tight end position to start the year. I do expect Darren Waller to not only make this football team, but have more targets probably than the other tight ends individually. Maybe Waller doesn't take the majority of all targets for the tight end room throughout the course of the year, but you can at least kind of start to lay the foundation that as this season unfolds, you get through the first couple of weeks, you get into the second month of the season, Waller will have assimilated it a way in which maybe that can be an evolving off-speed pitch to your fastball, if you will, which is your best skill players in Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane, although there's every injury Twitter doctor has a different diagnosis for Devon Achane right now. Just kind of wait and see on that front. He's dealing with a soft tissue calf. Mike McDaniel said on Monday, the Cavs can be tricky for explosive athletes, and that's certainly true. But there's a whole varying degree of spectrum, and for right now, like we can't worry about it, right? Like we don't know what Devon Achane's outlook looks like, and the time that we're getting now without Devon Achane practicing this week, Mike McDaniel said we wouldn't see him this week, as they are proactive in making sure that this heals quickly and is not something that lingers. This is valuable for both Jalen Wright and Ollie Gordon to get elevated reps in with the ones as you're trying to figure out who that second back should be. So you have players kind of getting toggled in the way of Darren Waller. You're getting role players that are kind of fighting directly with one another for snap share and opportunities between Ollie Gordon and Jalen Wright. Those guys getting elevated opportunities, toggled up. So it's kind of that point in camp where everybody's kind of been through the ringer a little bit. You got about a week left of training camp, and the work continues. The marathon has only just started, but getting, I think, opportunities for players that you can see working as this season unfolds, or players that are the critical backups, getting that work with the first team offense at this stage of camp, I think is helpful as compared to mutually exclusively having all of your ones working together and having no chemistry with the other guys that potentially would have to bridge the gap if you had an absence for a player of significance. So that's a little bit more on the Devon Achane / other running back side of things. But you had the inverse of that at tight end, where the Pharaoh Browns and the Julian Hills and the Tanner Connors, specifically for the kind of role that we're expecting for Darren Waller, they got their reps on the front end, and now it's up to who you perceive the starter to be, who just so happens to be a new player on the roster, to get himself up to speed. Speaking of new players, Matthew Judon and his press availability got me fired up a little bit. We're going to get into that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing this year. Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience unlike any before. Locked On Dolphins this year is playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features across 28 days in the month of August. To kick it off, they dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play Yahoo Fantasy Football, where the lowest scoring team each week is eliminated until there's just one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now is the time to get your league together. Give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you could still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right. Matthew Judon spoke with the media, talked about the fit that he felt and the fit that the team saw for him. But really, the first answer that he got to a question, and I believe it was Dave Furones that asked the question. Been a little bit of a whirlwind since coming down. I know that you posted some nice Miami views talking about on Matthew's Instagram page. What has it been like at the facility working with the team? And here's what Matthew Judon had to say. This gets me fired up right here. It's been all right. I got a little bit of views, but mostly it's about the work. It's about kind of coming down here and enjoying. It ain't about coming down here and enjoying myself and relaxing. I've had enough time while everybody was at camp to relax and views. It's about the work I put in, coming in here and hurrying up and getting acclimated with the system, figuring out the locker room traditions and the culture that they are building, kind of just figuring out where I'm going to be, how I'm going to be, and how I'm going to play. Yes, sir. Because I've already seen the complaints just for the sake of complaints. Oh, Matthew Judon, late stage player, past his prime. Seems like the kind of move the Dolphins would make. Every team makes these kinds of transactions for the record. Every team makes the veteran sprinkling in to kind of help fortify your strengths or your weaknesses. And for the Dolphins, it's quadrupling down on what they expect the strength of the unit to be. And Judon, by all accounts, had a hell of a day today. Multiple disruptive reps. He's out there with the orange long sleeves, which will be really fun. But this is the kind of transaction that, every team across the league makes at some point in time. It's a fiscally responsible, short-term commitment to a player that certainly has something left in the tank, but is not the marquee talent that he once was. And it wasn't all that long ago that Matthew Judon had 15 and a half sacks. I don't think that's the expectation that you should have for Matthew Judon. Matthew Judon, his first 2 seasons in New England, had 28 sacks, which I believe was third in the NFL over that stretch of time. He made 4 consecutive Pro Bowls between his final 2 years in Baltimore in 2019 and 2020. And then in 2021 and 2022, he also made the Pro Bowl, finished 9th in Defensive Player of the Year voting that year in 2022. Had 1 more year in New England, played in 4 games, and then played in all 17 games as a 15-game starter in 2024, had 5.5 sacks while playing over 650 snaps. This guy last year would have been your second best pass rusher behind Chop Robinson. And now he's your 4th. Like this would have been better than Emmanuel Ogbah as an option last year. And now he's your 4th and not presumably needed to play 655 snaps. But the psychology for Matthew Judon coming in, it's about the work. It ain't about coming down and enjoying myself and relaxing. All of the retirement home Dolphins and soft training camps and late stage career players that are here for a cafecito and a nice apartment for 4 months with palm trees. That's not what it's about. So it got me real fired up for Matthew Judon to say, yeah, the views are nice. I'm not here for the views. I'm here to work. And he gave some great insight as far as what his experiences have been like in the NFL. He talked about playing in the Baltimore and New England systems. Feels like Baltimore is kind of where his body of work can relate the most to what they're going to do here in Miami. He did reference New England, interestingly enough, for kind of understanding this division. And remember, he was in New England as recently as 2023. Understanding how this division plays. That's what he said. I think New England just helps me with the division. I'm comfortable in it. I'm comfortable in the division, familiar with how we're playing. But I think everywhere is different and every year is different. It's going to be a week-to-week thing. It was something you referred to several times. It's going to be a week-to-week thing. And I think that's when you reference some of the strengths of these guys on the edge, I think that's where maybe if everybody's fully healthy, I think that you can play matchups a little bit with what Judon brings to the table, where he's a little bit more of the Bradley Chubb model than he is the Chop Robinson model, where Chubb is length, physicality, power. It was what Anthony Weaver referred to him was his power rip move and ability to reduce angles and play the run. And I think all these guys are capable of playing the run. But if you're looking to optimize everybody's snaps, you get a team that wants to play heavy with tight ends, but they like to shift or they'll flip the formation around, and you don't want to worry about flip-flopping the ends or trying to have them get lined up, and then it's an early down on 12 personnel. You could say, hey, we're going to roll Judon and Chubb, and then that way, whatever side they want to, if they're going to shift or motion the tight ends, we got a guy with heavy hands. We got a guy that sets those hard edges definitively. And then we're going to win on early downs. And then that's where our speed guys like Jalen and Chop can come in and really thrive and prosper. Or maybe in a different week, you get a little bit more of a spread in space And it's, well, we want Phillips and we want Chop out there on early downs because they're smaller blocking surfaces. They play maybe a little bit more 11 personnel, or maybe they do some 10 personnel stuff with no tight end on the field early. And then we get into our rush down. So we want to have the speed package on the field where all those guys are out there together, and we can pick and choose who do we want mugged up on inside gaps, who do we want potentially dropping out into shallow underneath zone coverages. I see the vision for sure. And I think Judon is a good extension of giving you multiple options for each archetype of edge. Because Jalen Phillips and Chop Robinson can play the run, make no mistake about it. But their individual strengths, they're not cut exactly from the same cloth. So this gives you opportunities to match personnel on a week-by-week basis. And that's how I'm trying to read between the lines on maybe what Matthew Judon means as he repeatedly refers to, we are going to go on a week-by-week basis throughout the course of the season. But you tell me, we get a question talking about a sexy South Florida view for where we're staying. And he's like, no, this is about the work. This is about assimilating myself to this team and coming in and hustling. And I had the extra time. I'm here to work. These are the kinds that's the kind of vet experience that we already have a great deal of leadership in that edge room. But a player who's been in places like New England and Baltimore and successful programs, and those were some successful years. Nice little reminder for somebody on the outside coming in of what kinds of people the Dolphins chose to prioritize. And that falls in line with the Jeff Howe story for The Athletic for Mike McDaniel not that long ago. Now, we're going to talk about some bookkeeping. I did all of the current events first. We do have some bookkeeping to get into. We're going to finish with that here today on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. You ever decide last minute you want to head to the ball game with family or friends? Maybe it's game day and you realize you want to be there and take in the game in person. That's exactly where GameTime comes in. It is the easiest and best way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you could splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even a bigger group to go with you. GameTime makes it all possible. GameTime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. They've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets online. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last-minute tickets for the lowest prices, guaranteed. I went on a diatribe yesterday. And sure enough, I'm sitting here begging, pleading with the football gods. Can we please get the Zach Sieler contract info? We got it this morning. Spot Track came through. They heard our cries. So here's what I can tell you about the Zach Sieler contract extension from a bookkeeping perspective for the Dolphins. His cap charge was going to be about $12.25 million, between $12.25 and $12.5 million. It's now less than $8 million. So the Dolphins are going to save over about $4.5 million in cap space with this extension for Zach Sieler. So the way that it ends up paying out is he's getting a $16 million signing bonus. And remember, Zach was due, it was like $17 million across the last two years of his deal. So he's getting $17.285 million this year with a $16 million signing bonus and then a base salary that's the minimum amount. So almost all of his compensation goes into a signing bonus, which the Dolphins are then, as you would expect, spacing out into the next 5 years of salary cap commitments to reduce the cap charge relative to the cap that he's getting this year. So $1.255 million base with 1/5 of a $16 million signing bonus plus some of the money that was left over from a past restructure in 2023 gives you $7.88 million cap charge for 2025. In 2026, this salary is guaranteed. And because this salary is guaranteed, his 2026 compensation, they chose to automatically bake in the proration. And that's important because that means when he's paid his lump sum, his $26 million or 2026 option bonus is $14.19 million. When he gets paid that up front, and then it is prorated out across the next 5 years, starting in 2026, just like a signing bonus would be if he signed a new contract. So it's 14.19 divided by 5. That's like $2.838 million per year over the next 5 years, starting in 2026. And of course, if they moved on from Zach Sieler, all of the pushed into future years for cash that he's already received would then accelerate and hit your salary cap all at once. And that's how you end up with dead cap dollar amounts like what the Dolphins have for Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard and others, and Teron Armstead right now. Some dead cap is healthy. 49ers, I think, have $95 million in dead cap space. I think the Dolphins sitting around 50 and change. I think they're outside the top 10 in dead cap for 2025 as things currently stand. But that's neither here nor there. Zach Sieler is going to get $33 million over the next 2 years. $33.305 million. And that's guaranteed at signing. Is from a cash perspective. Remember, it was 3 years originally reported at 67 and change. It's officially 3 years, 64 million, so $21.33 million per season. And then the incentives are stacked on top of that. And that's where that extra money was reported in this contract. Zach's cash this year is the highest dollar amount of cash that he's going to receive in any year over the next 5 years in which he's under contract with the team. Because remember, he had 2 years, this year and next year, remaining on his old contract. And then he had 3 new years at that 67, what was reported $67 million stacked on top of it. So it's technically 5 years of player control for what was equivalent of 67 plus the $18 million or whatever it was that he was previously owed. Here's his cash scheduled and received in each of the next 5 years: 17.28, 16.02, 13.2, 16, and 16.75. His cash over the next 3 seasons ranks 8th, 11th, and 8th in 2027. And now 2027, and that's amongst interior defensive linemen. But there's going to be some contracts that happen that undoubtedly is going to push that $2027 amount down. I mean, in 2020, he's already not a top 10 paid defensive tackle in 2026 already. And they just signed the deal. So very well deserved for Zach Sieler. I think this is much more in line with where his performance level has been, but also through the lens of, you got to be cautious to not pay guys for what they've been and pay them for what they're going to be. This is a contract that, in my opinion, is going to age extremely gracefully for the Dolphins. Because after this year, he doesn't collect more than $16.75 million in any season of the next 4 years. And that comes in 2029. And who knows what the salary cap is going to be by then. From a cap perspective, because they put the option bonus in, this year his cap charge is 7.88, and then his cap charge next year in 2026, remember, it's an option bonus that gets spread out automatically. His 2026 cap charge is $11.27 million. So he's going to get $33 million in cash, and they're only going to have to account for 19 of it against the cap in that same 2-year stretch. Now, some of that is from past money, which means there's more prorated money into future years, and that's rolling debt, right? That's part of the strategy here. But there's an out in this contract after 2026 that's less than $10 million in dead cap. So you don't do these contracts expecting the worst, but you have to build the contract with the flexibility in case things go wrong. The team is well protected and the players well compensated is the definition of a win-win. Now, where does that leave the Dolphins from a salary cap perspective? Well, Judon was reported at 1 year up to 6. I believe the base value of that is half. So it's half of that is 1 year for 3 and then 3 years, $3 million in incentives for Matthew Judon. It's going to put the Dolphins somewhere right now. If you include all of the current bookkeeping that's on injured reserve, names like Kader Kohu, Alexander Madison, they're still at about $10 million in cap space right now after Judon. But if you have injury settlements where maybe some of these players, you don't have to account for their full bookkeeping, it could be more than that. And if you omit the IR money altogether, you're closer to $18 million in cap space. So if they wanted to add a player, they are more than welcome to add a player, and they will have wiggle room. And then, of course, they have those handful of restructure options, whether it's Jordan Brooks, whether it's Aaron Brewer. They have flexibility if they want a lever to pull because they want to add somebody that maybe is a little incrementally over budget. They can do at this stage, the Dolphins, from a roster management perspective, aside of like balancing the high stakes and needing to win and not mortgaging the future and trying to compete in the here and now, there's no transaction that you should consider off the books for the Dolphins as far as an addition to the team for cap purposes. They can do whatever they want to do if it makes sense for what their strategy has been. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. Go Fins. I'm out of here. I'll talk to you all again tomorrow.